Welcome to County Connection. I'm your host, Daryl Seymore, County Supervisor. Today we have with us Catrina Jenkins. Catrina, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Katrina's our Navajo County Emergency Manager, and she does a fantastic job getting us ready, getting us prepared for a lot of things. And right now you've got a guest today. You've brought Smokey, and there's maybe some people that don't even know who Smokey is.
I'd love to introduce him. For those that may not be aware of Smokey Bear, he does not have a middle name. Did you know that?
I did not.
It is Smokey Bear. It is not Smokey the Bear. I brought Smokey Bear with me since we're going to talk about wildfire preparedness today.
All right, that's
fantastic. I couldn't think of a better co-guest.
You know, I think if my memory reminds me of Smokey, he was a major fire. I think it was up in, was it Yellowstone or someplace?
Was New Mexico.
New Mexico, okay.
Just across the state line.
But anyway, as they went back and cleaned up, here was this cub bear clinging to the tree and had major burns on his feet and on his hands. And they took him in, and what a better way for our Forest Service to use him as a iconic of why we put fires out and why we smell the smokes and all of those things. So he is a hero for a lot of people.
He truly is. And you know, Smokey has a lot of insight and wisdom, and we try to work with all of our partners, and Smokey being one of them, but we have a great community of partners to work with up here to help with this very important subject.
That's good. So we moved out of winter. We didn't get a whole lot of snow yet. It's still possible the snow clear up till the end of May here, but you know, as winter is starting to change and we start looking at conditions, today being a very windy day and some of those things, we can dry out pretty quick. But
absolutely,
what's changing, what's on our radar right now that we need to be preparing as citizens and as everybody to be prepared?
So our outlook right now with the spring, you're absolutely correct. We're drying up. We did not get much of a winter. And we really rely on that snow for not just the moisture, but something I learned in this job is the weight of the snow packing down those fine fuels, the grasses and those kinds of weeds, those kinds of things that are on the ground shooting up. We want those to lay down so that they're harder to catch on fire. So we didn't get that this year. So they're standing straight up. So you're going to see a lot of mitigation efforts towards helping to prevent fires from catching in those fine fuels, because once they go, and they can go on a windy day like today, just like that. And before you know it, we're going to have a couple thousand acre fire. So taking care of, we have our Forest Service partners doing prescribed burning, both on the federal forest and state forestry. Our local partners are working together to kind of mitigate areas locally. Anything that we can identify as a threat, we're going to try and work on. We have a lot of forest out there. There's millions of acres of forest. So we obviously can't get to them all, but we're working on it.
I think if we were to compare, you know, this time last year, where we are, as I recall, as I drive up to Shoalo Lake, I drive out to White Mountain Lake, I see those lakes are full. And we think, oh, well, that's great. We have lots of water, so we're not going to have a serious fire issue here. But I know we're a little bit wetter, but yet at the same time, we don't have the deep soaking, the deep things that we've had in the past, too.
Yeah, we didn't get the big snowfalls. We did have a great monsoon season last year, which was beautiful, but it did create those fine fuels for us. Our lakes are doing great compared to a few years ago when it was abysmal. So we have some pluses, we have some minuses. It's not the worst conditions that we've ever been in, but wildfire up here is a year-round threat. And I want to have everybody hear that message across the board and remain vigilant year-round, because we've seen fires where it was snowing on the fire. So fires can happen at any time.
You know, I'm a native resident here of Shoalo and grew up, spent most of my life here. And this year, just after listening to some of your things that you presented at the city and at the county, I spent the weekend cleaning up around my yard, just from buildings that maybe I haven't paid as much attention to, that I want to get rid of some of that brush and some of the stuff,
Right.
clean it out. So your message is ringing true with me, and some of the
glad.
things that we have. So what are some of the things that we want people to be aware of and be ready? Where are some of the places they can pay attention to early signs and warnings that if we did have a situation, where are they going to hear it from?
So, to your point about your taking care of your property, we want everybody to look at that Firewise defensible space, right? We want your immediate home taken care of. We don't want you to rake all the way down to bare dirt. We do want some moisture retention, but we do want you to clean up the dry, dead stuff, trim up the lower limbs of trees, make sure that there's nothing too close to the house that would help catch that on fire. There's a lot of tools on the Firewise USA website. That is run by the National Fire Protection Agency, the NFPA. So there's a lot of tools. You can do a home assessment in just a few minutes on a weekend. You can clean up a lot of those threats and dangers at your home. Some other ways of being ready for any threat, whether it's wildfire or winter snow, is having a kit. As you said, where you get information is important. We have vetted resources for communication, being social media pages for the cities, towns, county, emergency management pages, local response pages. We have a page called 311info.net where we will post updates on any if disasters or events. We also have an alert system, and I hope everybody has heard of this before, but if they haven't, it's called Ready Navajo County. It is a quick 5-minute sign up. If you haven't signed up, you can find that on my website at navajocountyaz.gov/ready. And it literally just takes a couple minutes to tell us how you want to be notified with a phone number, whether it be a text or a voicemail or an email. However you want to get notified, we'll tell you what's going on.
You know, I think one of the things that I appreciate, last year we had the Wyrick fire, and you were on that every day. You were there. I was getting phone calls from you. You was telling me what was going on, where we were at, what we needed to be doing. What have you found that's like working with, when you're on the ground? Who are your contacts? Who do you work with? I mean, you have such a big team that comes together.
Team. We have great partners, as I said earlier. So we work with both our local fire agencies, the Sheriff's Office, the U.S. Forest Service, and DFFM, the Department of Fire and Forestry Management for Arizona. We have tribal partners. So for Wyrick in particular, it was Chief D. McCluskey. Like I said, the Sheriff's Office. We will have DPS in there. We call them all to the table. We were sending out alerts to them. We were sending out alerts to the public. We got some lessons learned. It wasn't perfect. We learned some lessons for ourselves on how to do better, and we try to take that into consideration every time, is to make sure what can we do better next time.
Now, how long have you been in the position you're in?
The position I'm in now, I think it's 4 years-ish. I've been all together with emergency management for 14 years, and all together with the county coming up on 21 years in May.
Okay. So then you've experienced the 4 fires that we've had, being the Rodeo Chetasky, the Wallow Fire, the Cedar Fire, and then the Wyrick Fire.
Yes.
Those have been the 4
big ones,
major fires that we've had.
And all the little ones in between.
Right.
Yes, I was actually a dispatcher for the Sheriff's Office during the Rodeo Chetasky Fire. I was in emergency management for Wallow, and then Cedar and Wyrick last year. Of course, I was in emergency management.
Okay.
So
now, let's say we had something. Where would the communications center? I mean, you don't have the communications center, obviously, where fire, so it's hard to say exactly where you'd have. But if something was happening, you want to set up a major communication area to start for, wherever that is, off-site, far enough away from the fire. But then, do you personally have to report to all of the different cities and towns, or do you just pick and choose, how many you've got to immediately in order there?
So it kind of depends, like you said, where it starts. If we'll use Show Low as an example, and please knock on wood, let's not have that happen. But if it were, I would definitely be reaching out to you, of course, our city manager, Ed, the mayor, and any of the other elected officials and city staff that need to be in the know so that they can help support. We would have our emergency operations center stood up, more than likely close by, but not in the path of direct danger, because we wouldn't want to have to interrupt our operations to move. We've seen that happen, and it's been one of those lessons that we learned not to do again. So it might be that we set up in Holbrook and that I'm traveling back and forth quite a bit, and I'll have someone managing the center itself while I'm up here going between the incident command, the elected officials meetings and community meetings that need to happen so that we keep our community informed.
Oh, that's great. Those are challenging times, and there's things that we learn from each and every one of them. When you talk about your command post, I'll never forget in the Rodeo Chetasky fire, they used the high school in that area of where it was, and they're sitting here that last couple of nights, they say, but tomorrow this will be at this point, we'll be evacuating this command center, all of those things. Then all of a sudden said, why did we set up our command center here? That's eventually, and thankfulness that didn't happen, but those are threats that come to it. So if we have to evacuate, okay, let's say, boom, we see the plumes on the horizon, they're growing, and we start watching, we start getting informations going out. I mean, sight is one thing up here in the mountains that most people become curious of. What is that smoke that we see on the horizon happening? How serious is it? And so from there, who would necessarily call the decision as to whether a community evacuates or something like that?
That is a great question. So our fire personnel on the ground have the operational knowledge of fire. Our law enforcement partners have the operational knowledge of evacuations and how to do it. And we've been prepping with both. We've worked together, they both work together on past fires to garner the knowledge that each other has. So our fire officials would make those staging points recommendations to the sheriff's office and the local law enforcement officials, whether it be Chief Provost or Chief Barnes in Pine Top, would also then work with the fire agencies to, okay, we're going to have to go ahead and evacuate this area. This is an immediate threat. So then they would get a hold of me and my team, and we would send out the messaging. The boots on the ground guys would start going door to door, and we've created evacuation kits for the law enforcement agencies so that they have that at a moment's notice and they're ready to rock and roll.
That's good. And we hope, it's always good to be prepared. It's always good to be ready. It's always good to have those things in order. And when you live in the mountains and you have to educate your neighbors who are up here vacationing because they're not aware of the protocol, they're not aware of things that are happening. So we encourage our citizens to be good citizens in sharing and be neighborly as far as those things happen. Do you have questions of myself or the county that maybe I could answer or share? This is your chance to.
I love that.
And I might have to say I'm not going to answer that, too.
I guess so. I've shared some of the lessons learned that I've had in the past fires and incidents. What are some of the lessons that you've learned?
I would say probably the biggest lesson came for myself was during the Cedar Fire, of how information shared out through the internet, through different sources, can also disrupt the whole community, not so much as people here. So the threat can be elevated at just the wrong slip of the tongue.
Correct.
We had a meeting and we had discussed that we had to be careful because we didn't want to kill the economics necessarily of the community. And we all pretty much knew where we were going that way. Well, somebody didn't get that memo and went out and said the White Mountains is closed. Well, it wasn't closed. No authority had ever issued that we were closed for the Cedar Fire. Well, that immediately stopped people from coming up here. When they heard that message, they made plans to go elsewhere. And literally, they said the revenues on certain online reservations and everything just came to a halt. And by the time we tried to change that, it was very difficult. But safety is always the number one
Yes.
concern that we have before economics. But at that point, there wasn't the need to
Sure.
issue that message. And so we learned that also that we have different partners. We have tribal partners. We have different cities and communities. And there are spokesmen for each of those departments and each of those communities and each of those tribes that they need to be allowed to share their spokesperson for what they want done for those areas too. Although the sheriff is busy trying to evacuate and doing things, and he has that direction, but there's still certain boundaries that we learn that need to be protected and need to be honored as well. And so, it's everything. You don't have a fire to put somebody in the limelight or put somebody there. That's the last thing you want to have in your community, but you want your community working together and people on social media not trying to be the first to report this or first to get that out, because a lot of times that information is inaccurate and it's not as and it can put more people in harm's way sometimes than protect. So that's probably what I have learned as much as anything on what would we do again or try to change a little bit through that.
Those are some great examples that you mentioned. Communication. We say it all the time. If we're not communicating at all, if we're only communicating a little bit, we're not communicating nearly enough. It's something that I try to instill in my team is over communicate, make sure that we know what's going on.
And it's letting everybody know, not just these people. These people then have to let their people, which has to let the citizens. And until you have contacted every citizen almost or got that message out, you haven't done your job in communicating effectively. Well, Catrina, we're coming up on an anniversary here.
We are.
Okay. It's an anniversary that is probably dear to my heart in one way or another, just because of the moment of why I feel changed the course of the fire, of the Rodeo Chetasky fire. It was June 5th?
I believe it was the 18th. I know it's June. And we're at the
2002.
Yep, 20 years.
So we're 20 years this June of what is now the second largest fire in Arizona's history, but probably I'll still call it the number one as far as what it involved and displacing people and everything that had to happen with it. More people were displaced from it. But one of the things that I can't help but get a little emotional about the fact that we watched that fire come, and we watched it come for days, and there was nothing that was going to happen, that it was going to come into Show Low and into the communities, and people who fought tirelessly and did everything that they could. And it was one of those issues that I've stayed behind to assist and to help. And you have to recognize the hand of our Heavenly Father in that fire. That many of the people who had evacuated had prayed and prayed and prayed and for the protection of the community. And I will always say that on that Saturday night, as the evenings come, that fire cools down a little bit. Yeah. And miraculously, through that night of Saturday night, the humidity levels went from almost nothing to like 59%. And so when Sunday came, it's almost like that fire just laid down. Yeah. And if you want to call it observed the Sabbath, didn't get active, didn't do a whole lot of stuff. It laid low. And then with those humidity stayed for the next day or two, it allowed that fire not to progress anymore. And then miraculously the east winds, which never blow from eastern direction, blew back into that fire, and it almost just put itself out almost. Yeah. And so those are blessings that we have in our community, and those are blessings that I want people to remember, that as we do our part to live our lives, to think and to be grateful for what we have on this mountain, we cannot replace those natural resources in our lifetime. We cannot replace human life that's a casualty, that's lost to it. But we can always be kind, and we can always be thankful for what we do have.
We can.
In that way.
Yes, most definitely. And being good neighbors and understanding that this beautiful land it is our duty and our responsibility to care for it. We are the stewards.
It is.
So I'm as deeply passionate as you are.
Yep. You know, and the sad part is, and I remind people that these fires were all human caused.
Yes.
These fires were not naturally caused. All of them have been a human caused fire.
Yep.
And so us as humans, we can do our defensive part beforehand and hopefully prevent disaster from coming into our community.
I agree.
And keep Smokey smiling.
Keep Smokey smiling. Yeah, one of the messages I do want to share is that it's everyone's responsibilities, whether you live here in the White Mountains. The fire restrictions and the laws that are put into place are to protect your home and your property, as much as those rules and restrictions are in place for the visitors and guests. They apply to everybody. Every year I hear, "Oh, that doesn't apply to me. I live here." "Oh, I don't have to listen to that. I don't live here." It goes for everybody, and that's one of the messages that we're trying to get out as far and wide as we can, is that everybody has to be a good steward all the time.
All the time. Well, Catrina, it's been great having you today on the show, and I appreciate your guest, Smokey, here. And we just encourage our citizens, if you have any questions, please go to that website that she talked about, navajocountyaz.gov/ready.
Yep.
And sign up and be part and be prepared. And we hope not to have to need it, but if we do so, we'll be prepared and appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Have a
Appreciate
great
it.
day.
Thanks for being with us today on County Connection, and hope that you have a fantastic day. Thank you.